Throughout the latter half of Black Ops 6 Zombies, we've heard repeated references to something or someone called the Great Voice. Though there have only been a few mentions, the fact it keeps being brought up and the context it's referencing definitely indicates that it's going to play a major role in Black Ops 7 Zombies, potentially as the major threat or villain. But what exactly is it? That's what we're going to find out today. Could they have already even been seen in Reckoning's main quest? I will discuss that and so much more later, so let's go over all of the possibilities for who or what the Great Voice is. The first mention we come across is in the ending cutscene of The Tomb, where we see several files that we now know to be setting up having to charge the Sentinel artifact in the liminal spaces of Liberty Falls' mansion, referencing the Shards of Tempest. Other than the Richtofen file, which is a video depicting cell growth, the other 4 files are Rhodes File 278, the 4 artifacts. Ancient writings identify 4 known Sentinel artifacts: the Odin artifact, Danu artifact, Ra artifact, and Zeus artifact. All share common morphology and function, with surface details corresponding to the cultures where they first appeared. The commonalities from such far-flung sources suggest widespread early contacts with a dark dimension and a point of origin far beyond the terrestrial realm. Rhodes File 118 appear in historical records since Egypt's pre-dynastic period, and thus did Kortifex render unto Amenhotep the instrument of eternal renewal, and bid him feed it shards of tempest, that the gates of Duat bend to his will. Song of Amenhotep 4100 BCE. Craft File 487, Odin artifact. Rhodes' collection of ancient texts and depictions of Sentinel artifacts led me to conclude that function as batteries for gathering, storing, and manipulating the substance that came to be known in alchemical circles as prima materia. Descriptions of the rituals indicate each artifact is ringed with receptacles that need to be completely filled in order to render the artifact operational. Shem File 49, Liberty Falls mansion. Hark, my flock, your shepherd has heard the great voice from beyond, the voice that drew shamans and medicine men here for centuries before our arrival, the voice that designated us as its chosen, bade us seize the serpent mound and build our dwelling upon it. Here in our mansion of eternal life shall the horned key open the way, breaking the bonds of mortality that we may dwell forever in our promised realm. Ready yourselves, for the day approaches for our final meal, and farewell to the flesh. As we can see, one of these things is not like the other. The 2 Rhodes files and the Craft file detail research into the Sentinel artifacts' histories, showing Alistair Rhodes' conclusion that these objects originated from the Dark Ether, and that Kortifex himself gave the Ra artifact to the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, with instructions that it would allow him to bend the gates of the afterlife to his will. Obviously, in hindsight, this is a hint to how Richtofen plans to bring back his family from the dead. The Craft file after this is basically just more set up for how exactly we were going to charge the artifact in Shattered Vale. The Shem file, however, is totally different. It is included because, of course, this was written/spoken by Shem in the mansion, but also it mentions the ritual that actually shattered space-time in Liberty Falls. And here it is actually where we find our first mention of the Great Voice from beyond. Shem tells us that the voice is what initially instructed all of the Native American holy men to that sacred site, where the statue of the Ether Worm resided, and that it too led Shem and his flock there, and instructed him to build the mansion and conduct the ritual. At the time, myself and a lot of others assumed that the voice was Kortifex the Deathless, because Kortifex was already mentioned in one of the other files here. This seems like a logical conclusion, and more information we got in Shadowvale seemed to confirm that. I'll play for you now.
Attend me, brethren. With this sacrifice, we conclude the second rite. The glorious hour of our ascension draws nigh. We, who have toiled sore long these 40 wretched years. We, who have endured the bile, scorn, and pity of Liberty Falls and its sheep. We, who in this year of the Lord 1810, here in this most holy and sanctified of places, shall reap the just rewards of our labors and be remade by Him. Behold. shall be the eternal guardians of a new garden that shall flourish, yea, unto all the ends of the earth. Great voice from beyond, hear your servants. May our prayers transcend the gulf between worlds. Hear us, Deathless One. We stand ready to fulfill thine dark, unholy covenant. Beuta she no moreta. Beuta she no more lu. Beuta she no more ska. Beuta she no more te. Release us from the bonds of death. No, we had a deal. We had such agony. Why?
Here in the Shem Folly file, once again, he refers to the Great Voice from Beyond, and confirms that he and his flock are the servants of this entity. Next, however, he mentions the Deathless One. Now, for those who didn't play Vanguard Zombies or have forgotten, Kortifex's full title is Kortifex the Deathless. This is even further alluded to by the line from the Sam AI when you pick up the antler carving, the horned key that Shem mentions was essential for their ritual, and in the liminal space he needs in order to be sacrificed. We have this quote from the Sam AI on Shadowman: "That carving is a relic from the tribe who lived here before the mansion was built. They used it to commune with their god of death until Josiah Shem and his cult destroyed them." Though not strictly related to the Horn Key, Grief, which came out just after Shadowman, also contained a line from Sam and Kortifex, again referring to him giving the Egyptians the Ra artifacts. Sam says, "Kortifex gifted his ancient worshippers a sentinel artifact for their troubles. Lucky Bronze Age succubs." All of these things pointed towards this great voice being Kortifex the Deathless, the mysterious contact obscuring them. It just made sense, especially with Sam calling him the god of death as well. Was it an assumption? Definitely, but we were at a point in the storyline where it felt like making assumptions for these kinds of things was the best we were going to get. That was until Reckoning. First off, in a conversation where we hear Sam learning to mimic Zykov's voice, we hear him exclaim,
Yes! Easy peasy!
By the great voice, I would not call it easy exactly, but now the student does become the master. Will you just leave me to my misery? Tear them to pieces.
Yes, this might work after all.
What? That was my voice. What are you?
There are people who must be compelled to get something I need. If I just ask, there is a 97.38% chance they will decline.
The audacity. I do not hate that.
I won't play the full intel, those were just some excerpts from it, as it's not really relevant, and I'll have a whole video coming up detailing the Sam AI and Zykov in this map and the problems that arise from some of the intels in the map. That'll be linked on screen and in the description. But essentially, Zykov uses this phrase as an exclamation, like a human saying, "Oh my god," or something similar. To him, the Great Voice is something powerful, ancient, something to be respected and feared by the Great Voice, by God. Next, from Panos, we learn that his Panos' shadowy benefactor is actually the Great Voice from Beyond. Just to jog your memory, I'm going to include the intel from Shad Vale about Panos' ally first. We have the document A Monstrous Proposal, Personal Diary, 2/5/1991. I am no stranger to hard work, so I'm used to being tired. Exhausted even, but this is different. This morning, I felt like I didn't quite wake up from my dreams. Indistinct voices continued to echo in my mind. None of them were familiar to me, but one stood out. He spoke with an almost hypnotic but confident tone and addressed me by name. I could teach you so much, Pericles, but you are going to have to want it. You are going to have to burn for it with your body and soul. Even now, as I drink my coffee and write this, I feel a cold chill in my veins. Now, I'm going to play the shadowy benefactor intel from Shad Vale, as well as the new Great Voice from Beyond intel from Reckoning, and then I'll jump back in and explain them.
He came to me again, my friend, my benefactor, my salvation. Time is strange in this place. A moment ago, I was in the church. A moment ago, he was here with me. In another moment, who knows? Like the director, he came with promises, power, forbidden knowledge, a reckoning for my enemies. But unlike the director, his mastery of the Dark Ether is real. And what's more, he promised me a way out. When I return to the world, I will be his agent. The future he speaks of, the one we will fashion together. I can hardly wait. In only a moment, we begin. The voice spoke to me again. The great voice from beyond. My friend. It guided me through a dream state more lucid than any I have ever known. It was more than transcendental. It was transformative. I saw through the mist and fog. My gaze did not linger upon the foul wretches that wandered in search of prey. I looked upon the sprawling landscape beyond. Though this place was shrouded by darkness and tainted by trauma, I saw lights. I saw brightness. From the fields, I glimpsed a farmhouse, a sunken town, rustic and ravaged by age, a cabin overlooking the inky black water of a lake, and a pyramid somehow floating in the distance. A single tower still stood tall. Though I was alone, I knew no fear as I walked across this unfamiliar realm. When I felt a yawning hunger deep in my belly, the voice guided me towards a place of nourishment. My eyes feasted upon its saturated colors, and my appetite was swiftly sated. My thirst was soon quenched. I knew for sure this was so much more than a mere dream when I read the sign. My friend confidently issued a solemn promise. This land that once was will be restored, as will I.
If you want to know more about this intel and why it's a teaser for the first map of Black Ops 7 with some kind of transit remake, you can find a link on screen and down below. For now though, we just need to know that this confirms that Panos' shadowy friend was the Great Voice all along, and seemingly the exact same entity communicating with Shem and his flock. Now, this introduces some extremely weird complications into the story. Way back on Liberty Falls, we also had these lines. Even if we play devil's advocate and dismiss the university line as Panos just talking about himself and making a joke, we can still say a few things for definite about this entity now known as the Great Voice. Panos thinks the Great Voice may be aggressive towards the director, but doesn't actually hate him, and has made a promise to it to find its friends if he escapes the Dark Ether. We assumed way back that this could have perhaps been the real Samantha Maxis among a few other candidates. A large piece of reasoning for this was the assumption that the friends were the Terminus crew at the time. However, we really didn't have enough information to make an informed decision. back then. Samantha Maxis is obviously dead, as confirmed on Reckoning, as long as that's not going to be changed in the future or isn't a red herring. And Panos doesn't react in any meaningful way to the Terminus crew on the map, unfortunately, to learn more about whoever he was contacting and whatever his plan was. Let's create the profile and lay out everything we know about the Great Voice then. Once we've done this, we can see if various characters fit the profile or not to make an educated guess about its true identity. We know that they know a lot of personal information about Eddie Richtofen, enough to make Panos reconsider his appointment to Project Janus. They apparently don't hate Eddie truly, but may show an outward dislike or hostility. Has friends that it wants to find and asks Panos to find them. Panos confirms in Shad Vale that the Great Voice presents itself as male, with Panos using he pronouns, even though Panos later switches to it in Reckoning when describing the Great Voice. This is likely to be a potential mistake by the writers, or potentially it's because that intel is set before he finds out they are a he. His mastery of the Dark Ether is real, unlike the director's, indicating he is likely a being of that reality rather than a human simply trying to understand it. He tells Panos that he can grant him everything that he wants, but he is going to have to burn for it with his body and soul. The Great Voice promises to restore the Dark Ether to how it once was. Zykov respects the Great Voice as something far beyond, and he referencing restoring the multiverse and restoring the Dark Ether to how it once was makes sense why he wants to bring back Transit, seemingly, as the intel that I played earlier implies. So let's move forward to what this could mean. With that out of the way, let's compare to the likely candidates. Samantha Maxis, the real one, Kortifex, a new Shadowsmith character, Dark Ether Richtofen, and the Shadowman. First and foremost for Samantha Maxis, what is the evidence? She knows a lot of personal information about Eddie, enough to make Panos reconsider his appointment to Project Janus. She doesn't truly hate Eddie, but may show an outward dislike or hostility. Has friends that he wants to find and asks Panos to find them. Panos confirms in Shad Vale that the Great Voice presents itself as male, with Panos using he pronouns, even though Panos later switches it to it on Reckoning. This could be a mistake by the writers or accidentally spoiling something they didn't intend, but this is evidence against them being Samantha. His mastery of the Dark Ether is real, unlike the director's, indicating he is likely a being of that reality rather than a human simply trying to understand it, which could be or couldn't be evidence for Samantha Maxis, because it could imply they're an entity, but at the same time Samantha Maxis has Dark Ether powers, so she could very well master it potentially. The next point is, he tells Panos that he can grant him everything he wants, but he is going to have to burn for it with his body and soul, which definitely is against the idea of it being Samantha. The Great Voice promises to restore the Dark Ether to how it once was, possibly meaning to restore the multiverse, as has been leaked. Zykov respects the Great Voice as something far beyond him, again evidence against Samantha. In conclusion, this gives a rating of 3.5 out of the 8 pieces of evidence. Ignoring the fact that she's apparently dead according to Zykov, the Sam AI, as well as Richtofen on Reckoning, which is a big fact to ignore, Samantha just doesn't really fit this profile. She might know a lot about Eddie that could possibly shock Panos and probably doesn't hate him. She would certainly want to try and find the Terminus crew too, but the rest doesn't really make sense. Samantha is obviously not a he as far as we're aware, until now. And even in spite of that, changing the pronoun to it in Reckoning, it can't be ignored. Samantha definitely has the mastery of the Dark Ether, but we've been led to believe that the Forsaken obliterated her, and so her mastery is lacking compared to others who were also originally human. Sam wouldn't really tell someone that they'd have to burn. She's ultimately mostly been seen as a good character, and would likely want to try and stop Panos from doing his atrocities. Sam equally wouldn't want to restore the Dark Ether and the multiverse. She was there when Nikolai banished what couldn't be destroyed to the Dark Ether. It was meant to be a containment of the Ether's contamination. This is the exact opposite of what she'd likely want. And finally, as stated before, Zykov totally consumed her according to him. Why would he view her as beyond him? Now moving on to the evidence for and against Kortifex. Kortifex shouldn't know a lot of personal information on Eddie, enough to make Panos reconsider his appointment to Project Janus. Kortifex wouldn't hate Eddie, that doesn't make sense. Nor would he have friends that he would want Panos to find. Kortifex of course matches Panos describing them as a he. He does have mastery of the Dark Ether, like Panos says. Panos saying he's going to have to burn for it with his body and soul, I would say 50-50 matches. It's definitely in kind of the MO of Kortifex, but I could see it better matching other characters does as well. The Great Voice wanting to restore the multiverse, to me, doesn't really match Kortifex entirely, but Kortifex seemingly predated the collapse of the multiverse into the Dark Ether, so that could be evidence that he would want to bring it back, but he didn't really have anything to do with it or interact with humanity during then, only once the multiverse got plunged, so I don't know why he would want to bring it back. And with Zykov respecting the Great Voice as something far beyond him, would not be evidence it's Kortifex, because he literally consumed him, so he clearly does not see him as a Great Voice or respects him. This to me gives 3 out of 8 evidence for Kortifex. Surprisingly, Kortifex scores even lower than Samantha Maxis, in spite of what we thought during Shad Vale. The Great Voice that Shen was speaking to, the same entity, assumedly, that spoke to Panos, just can't be Kortifex. Kortifex has never shown any interest in Eddie we've ever seen. He may not have even known of Kraft's existence during Vanguard, outside of being an annoying human who was playing host to Belikar. Similarly, for the second point, there is nothing whatsoever to suggest Kortifex has any complex feelings towards Eddie. Kortifex is pretty adamant about his disgust for red blood mortals. He only put up with Von List because he had no other choice. Next, Kortifex has no real friends. He's willing to even kill his own parents, and all of his allies either betrayed him or were betrayed by him, such as in the Nether Wars. Kortifex is presented as a he, so he gets a point here, and he definitely has mastery of the Dark Ether, so can get a point there too. He scores another half on wanting to restore the multiverse. We never see Kortifex make mention to it directly, but we know the arrival of the Pack-a-Punch and so on greatly enhanced his wars in the Dark Ether. So it's possible that he would want to gain more power, but equally it's not his world, so why would he care? Finally, Zykov would definitely not respect Kortifex, given he almost certainly consumed Kortifex during his early days in the Dark Ether. This more than any other point makes me convinced that it isn't him. Now let's go over the evidence for the new Shadowsmith character we hear Ava Jansen reference at the ending of Modern Warfare Zombies. To me, they rank, I think, 4 out of 8 on the scale. This is a strange one, but it had to be included. Obviously, we can't really comment on a totally speculative character. We know very little or almost nothing about the Shadowsmiths as a faction, other than that they reside in the Dark Ether and are powerful enough to scare the entity from Modern Warfare Zombies. We can't say whether or not this Shadowsmith knows Eddie, likes or dislikes him, or has friends that he needs to find, so they all just get a question mark. However, it could be a he, because you just need to write a male character for that, and we will likely have many Shadowsmith entities with different voices and presentations, so that gets a point. Similarly, if it's from the Dark Ether, it likely has mastery, so that gets another point. Again, if they are writing a new character for a villain, it might as well tell Panos he'll burn, because it's a new character. They can do whatever they want, and matches what you would expect from an old Dark Ether demon. It could very well likely want to restore the multiverse. As we are not sure about the Shadowsmiths faction, this may well be their goal. That gets a tentative point. We can't say that Zykov respects the Shadowsmiths though. Much like with Eddie, we really can't say anything about their relationships with other characters, so that gets a question mark. Ultimately, we can't say a lot about a totally speculative character, but it needed mentioning, as I still think it's likely. It just depends entirely on how many Shadowsmith characters there are and what they do. And according to Tom Henderson, they've described the Black Ops 7 Zombies villain as being called the Warden, which is probably the hat-wearing individual that we see in Ava's mirror. But we don't know if they are one and the same as the Shadowsmiths, so we're going to have to wait and see about that. Of course, the entity references the Shadowsmiths right before that, so we have to assume that, but it is very well possible they could be different. Now let's move over to the next candidate, Dark Ether Richthofen. I score them a 5.5 out of 8. Now by Dark Ether Richthofen, I'm talking about not just the Richthofen we play as in Black Ops 6, but any hypothetical Richthofens who pop up out of the Dark Ether. Potentially the one that we see in the Reckoning's ending cutscene, this new version of Richthofen that seems to potentially be some kind of similar version to Ultimus and Primus. He seems to be a Nazi yet again, that much is confirmed, but we don't really know much about him. Regardless, he'd almost certainly know about where Eddie came from originally, given he exists in the Dark Ether and may even bleed memories with his other versions of himself, like what happened with Element 115 delusions. He'd not really hate Eddie, but would likely put on an outward aura of aggression and mockery. We saw this with the Primus and Ultimus versions of Richthofen in Alpha Omega. He has a few different people he could be referencing to as friends, perhaps until the moment we saw the galaxy above the Central Artifacts. These new characters hadn't actually manifested in the Dark Ether yet, and needed Panos to put the pieces into place for the Reckoning's quest to happen. So potentially the friends he's referring to are the other 3 original characters we see in the Reckoning's ending, Nikolai, Takio, and Dempsey. Equally, you could argue he's also talking about the Terminus crew, who eventually join them at the ending, especially considering Richthofen says welcome to the party as if he was expecting to meet the original characters, and could have potentially even influenced events to lead to them coming there with getting plunged into the Sentinel artifact. But the fact Panos doesn't have a strong positive reaction to them tells me me this probably isn't the case. So I believe it would make more sense to be referring to Takeo, Nikolai, and Dempsey as opposed to the Terminus Gru if it does end up being this version of Richtofen. But because of this confusion, it only gets half a point. Obviously, Richtofen is a he, so this gets a point as well. His mastery of the Dark Ether could possibly be greater than the director's. All Richtofens are very intelligent, so one living in the Dark Ether could have unimaginable knowledge of it, especially with, for example, his prior Ultimus incarnation literally being in control of the Ether at one point in time. The Great Voice helped Panos to build the SDG in Liberty Falls, which bears a visual similarity to the Dark Mechanism, so it could very well be from Dark Ether Richtofen's mind, considering his past connections with the Shadowman and the Warden seen on the alternative Mob of the Dead loading screen. However, we just can't say for certain, so it gets half. He might well tell Panos that he'll burn body and soul, and especially given this Richtofen's attire, it's entirely possible he's more evil than any other version due to him potentially being a full-on Nazi as opposed to Ultimus Richtofen that worked for Group 935 but didn't want them to merge with the Nazi party. But I doubt Treyarch would give us a truly evil player character, so I'd only give this 1/2. I'm hoping this version of Richtofen is a more nuanced version like all of his other incarnations. He could potentially want to remake the multiverse. Perhaps this Richtofen believes Primus Nikolai's plan failed, or that there is another way to defeat the cycle while bringing the multiverse back, or perhaps he's just making another evil grand scheme to become a god. We can't say right now, obviously it's too early, so again it gets half a point. We can't say for sure that Zykov would respect Richtofen, however in Forsaken, he quotes Richtofen in Tag to Toten and says it's an old Dark Ether saying. I'll play that for you now.
As the old Dark Ether saying goes, you're all out of rabbits.
Was them or me?
Do you know what that means?
It's possible then that Richtofen is a legendary figure in the Dark Ether, a human who fights and wins against the forces of the immortal gods of the realm, someone Zykov would surely look up to as he strove to do the same thing. But it's definitely an uncertainty, so it gets half a point once more. Our final candidate, arguably Zombies' most iconic villain, the Shadowman, is a candidate I want it to be. He would definitely know a lot about the director, with him literally saying to Eddie as a child, "I'll be seeing you from within the summoning key," noted on the Canorium timeline. This is an unavoidable direct link between the Shadowman and Eddie. He gets a point here. He would likely have complex feelings towards Eddie, like he often does to the other Richtofens. We see this in Revelations, where he explains that Richtofen was once an apprentice to him. He's describing the different versions of Richtofen here to deliberately try and make Primus mistrust him. But he's also not wrong. Richtofen kills him every cycle, but also is instrumental in opening the MPD and allowing him to act within the dimensions. Primus Richtofen stealing the summoning key allows the Apothecans to claim Dimension 63. Monty distrusts Richtofen greatly, as he is basically an unknowable variable in every equation, and so this Shadowman, in spite of Richtofen, often working against the Apothecans, likely views him as an asset. And of course we have this most damning quote on Revelations.
You do know that Richtofen is a friend of mine. I say friend, but really he's so much more than that. At one point, I almost considered him my apprentice. I mean, he did stab my reporter friend and steal the summoning key. But at one point, he did everything I told him to. I keep hoping he'll remember the promise he made to me so long ago.
Because of this, he definitely gets a point, especially because, apparently, Richtofen made a promise to the Shadowman that we literally never find out what it is. So could that promise still be fulfilled to this day? While we can't know for sure that the Shadowman has friends necessarily, this is the parlance he often uses. In the same quote where he calls Richtofen his apprentice, he does get annoyed that Primus Richtofen stabbed his reporter friend. Obviously the reporter is no friend to the Shadowman really, he's a tool, but this is the kind of casual tone the Shadowman often takes to put humans at ease, so he gets half here. The Shadowman is obviously portrayed as he, so he gets a point here of course. Moreover, you could easily see how he could also be seen as an it when is in his true Apothecan form. So he's by far the strongest candidate for this and gets a point. The Shadowman's mastery of the Dark Ether is undoubtedly real. The initial confrontation between the uncorrupted and corrupted keepers was entirely because of the former trying to utilize the Dark Ether. Regardless of what you think of the Shadowman's true origins, obviously I'm big on the John D theory and believing he's Edward Kelly, he would have direct knowledge of the Dark Ether through the MPD and other corrupted keepers and the Apothecan's time in the Dark Ether in exile. He gets a point here. And even in the Great Voice's intel on on Reckoning, one of the places he describes for the Black Ops 7 Zombies launch map is some kind of floating pyramid, which sounds exactly like the MPD. So again, with the Shadowman being the one with direct connection with the MPD, it makes so much sense for him. Not only would the "you are going to burn for it" quote likely fit the Shadowman's commonly used language, but a similar thing happens with the Warden of Alcatraz, a worship of the Shadowman before his self-electrocution. He literally says with a crazed laugh, "I'm going to burn for it" verbatim, that I'll play now.
Oh, I'm going to burn. Oh, the fools. They want justice for the toll I've extracted from this forsaken island.
Sir?
This fits his MO entirely. The Shadowman is by far the strongest candidate at this point, in my opinion, especially because the rituals we complete with the Sentinel artifacts in the liminal spaces on Shad Vale literally follow the exact same animation style as the rituals on Shadows of Evil, obviously by the Shadowman, with the characters hovering above the Sentinel artifact, or in Shadows of Evil's case, the summoning key, and then their souls being sucked into the artifacts. The Shadowman would almost certainly want to restore the multiverse. Perhaps not the cycle itself, but definitely the multiverse. The Apothecans were among the most active spreaders of the Ether's corruption through Element 115, and needed to do so because they feed on life energy like parasites. If the multiverse were to return, they may be able to feed for eternity. They had an endless, ravenous lust to consume worlds. The only thing against the Shadowman is the fact that the summoning key broke at the ending of Tag de Toten, and the Shadowman should have been in there at the time because in the broken cycle, he never escapes the summoning key on Revelations unless that's something that happens off screen. We also have Dr. Monty's scarf on Reckoning in the main quest, which Samantha collected when she was in the Dark Ether during Firebase Z. Now, Nikolai confirms that Dr. Monty got plunged into the Dark Ether in the Tag de Toten ending that I'll play for you now.
When we are gone, so too is everything that spewed forth from the ether. Element 115, the Apothecons, even Monty himself, all of it will be banished to where it belongs. The Dark Ether.
So Dr. Monty is a big candidate as well, who could be the Grey Voice, especially because he was literally the god of the old story and could definitely be seen as a god of the Dark Ether, and he was confirmed to get thrown in there. But the fact that Samantha has his scarf would imply that he died, because how else could he lose his scarf? The note that you get refers to them as an M, not referring to Samantha Maxis, and obviously that's how he noted all of his ciphers, etc. in Black Ops 3 Zombies and Black Ops 4. I think the reason why Samantha Maxis has other original characters' clothing, for example, she came out wearing Nikolai's goggles, and as confirmed as well on Reckoning, she came back with Takeo's katana. I think the reason why is because she came across the remnants of Ultimus and Primus after they died in the Tag de Toten forest, which we've been speculating the forest is actually inside the Dark Ether, so their remnants would remain in that realm. But obviously we see with the new versions of the original characters in the Reckoning's ending, Takeo still has his katana. This version of Nikolai has a similar goggles to the new version of Nikolai, so I think the fact that she got these clothing pieces confirms that they died on Tag de Toten. We just have new characters now, new versions of them, which to me again suggests that if Dr. Monty has lost his scarf, it's because he ultimately might have gotten defeated in the Dark Ether. Whilst he was a powerful god, he existed in Agartha before. That's where his influence remained. We don't know if he would have the same level of influence of the Dark Ether, and he might have just gotten consumed by the realm. I know people have been speculating, could it even be the first one? Could the Shadowman and Dr. Monty have reformed, and that could be whoever this Great Voice is? I could see that as an option as well. Now, we can't say for sure that Zykov would respect the Shadowman. However, given his power, both in the old story and possibly now, it wouldn't be hard to imagine him, at the very least, fearing the Shadowman as someone he couldn't beat, especially if he has now become this legendary figure, the Great Voice. So to sum up the evidence, from least likely to most likely. First of all, Kortifex with 3 out of 8. Definitely not what I expected when writing this video, but he just doesn't fit what we know about the Great Voice. It's possible they could try and slot it in, but it would be so incredibly difficult to justify now that all of the evidence to it not being him. Now, it's weird that they are referred to as the Deathless, similar to Kortifex, but could it just be the Great Voice was trying to pretend they were Kortifex to Josiah Shem, for example, especially with his connections with the Order, and obviously the Order did get influenced by Kortifex back in the Egyptian days, so he probably or maybe could have been aware of Kortifex, and so the Great Voice tried to trick him by pretending he was Kortifex, assuming they are him. Now with Samantha Maxis, she gets 3.5 out of 8. I just personally see no way the Great Voice is her. They could do some writing shenanigans to make it work, to try and retcon the he, but it just feels pointless. They'd have to rewrite so much of what they've only just written. Now for the new Shadowsmith character, they get a 4 question mark out of 8. They could have much higher points if we knew more about the character, but obviously this one was a bit strange. There's just too little we just don't know about the Shadowsmiths. But 4 points for certain with the rest up for debate definitely makes this candidate a possibility, and perhaps we'll have to revisit this in a future video as that score could well increase. It's worth pointing out a few things here. The Great Voice is promised to Panos. I'll play that clip now.
My friend confidently issued a solemn promise. This land that once was will be restored, as will I.
This definitely sounds a bit like Spragmos' poem. The devoured shall be reborn, their scarred ashes shall be reformed, the Forsaken's torment will be undone when the old ones reign once more. In fact, it works so well that you could swap out the third line for what he says to Panos and it could still work. Coincidence? Probably. But it's definitely similar in theme at least. It's definitely interesting as well that Forsaken describes consuming Samantha and Reckoning that I'll play the quote for now.
Is that computer back to badger me? She talks like that woman I devoured.
This is leading people to think Samantha may not be free now that he's defeated, but it may not really be Samantha, but just her remnants, her ashes, that the Great Voice could essentially steal / mimic and use as a pawn, similar to how the Sam AI mimics Zykov as the announcer voice, and the Dark Ether clones characters, meaning that it may not really be her, but just remnants that is the arm that grabs Ava Jansen at the ending of Modern Warfare Zombies. Furthermore, the Pact Demon from Black Ops Cold War, still such a looming mystery, could easily be made to be this character. Making mention of the old ones is entirely possible that these threads will connect together in the form of a new Shadowsmith character. And I'll play those quotes for you now as well.
Our ways are of the old world. We will not be forgotten.
As a final addition to this character, the strange entity that appears during the Reckoning main quest and attacks the players bears a bit of resemblance to the assumed Shadowsmith in the ending of Modern Warfare Zombies. You see this shadowy figure that literally only just slightly damages you during the quest. Given this step of the quest seems really out of place with this being attacking you out of nowhere, it's possible it's meant to serve as a shocking and sudden teaser for this Shadowsmith character or the Warden or whoever they are. And the purple smoke that they emit very much seems similar to the purple smoke that the Sam AI uses in the Liberty Falls intro cutscene, or when the outbreak happens with the canisters in the beginning of Modern Warfare Zombies. Now for Dark Ether Richthofen, he gets 5.5 out of 8. Unsurprisingly, Richthofen scored highly. It's very rare that he's not at least tangentially related to something, and he may well, once again, be at the center of everything here. There are a few issues as we went over, though, particularly about finding his friends, but that could easily be cleared up immensely with Black Ops 7 and it be referring to the original characters or Terminus crew. As we will actually get a chance to play as this character, we will just have to wait and see. Now for the Shadowman, I've given them a 7 out of 8. By far the strongest character here in my opinion. There's just too much that lined up. It wasn't mentioned in the profile, but there's even a resemblance between the mysterious, shadowy, hat-wearing figure, literally in shadows in the mirror in the Modern Warfare Zombies ending, and the Shadowman. I'm not saying it's 100% him. This could be the new Warden character described by Tom Henderson, but it's definitely a decent bet that the true identity of the Great Voice could be the Shadowman. Maybe the new Warden character, which is not referring to the Warden of Alcatraz by the way, could be one and the same as the Shadowman, or potentially even just remnants of him, or copies of him, now mutated in the Dark Ether. But what do you guys think? Do you have any other candidates who this profile could be applied to? I think it's actually a decent tool, so if there's any other character not mentioned in this video who you think might be the Great Voice, it's definitely worth using this method to try and see if they are a likely candidate or not. I'm definitely leaning to them either probably being the Shadowsmiths or this hat-wearing figure if they are not the Shadowsmiths, / potentially being the Shadowman. They could be different characters or one and the same, we will have to wait and see, but their MOs definitely feel very similar. And with the Shadowman wanting to restore the multiverse, it makes a lot of sense as well. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments down below. Plenty more videos to come. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not for the latest and greatest Call of Duty news information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye. To conclude this video, I want to shout out the fact that I finally decided to make a Patreon and Cameo account, both of which will be linked below if you want to help support the channel. On Patreon, you can sign up for the lowest tier of just $1.50 a month to get exclusive access for my Discord, where we can discuss the zombies lore, trivia, or whatever you desire. A place where you lot, my community, can better connect. Your names will also appear at the end of videos thanking you. For $5.50 a month, you get all of that, and I will be doing exclusive exclusive monthly Q&As. And for $16.50 a month, you again get all of that, and I will be doing exclusive lore videos, such as unpacking niche parts of the Treyarch documents I've been breaking down on my channel that don't as much suit a main channel video. For the highest tier, only for those with the ability to and who really want to help out the channel, you get special bonuses I've yet to determine and verbal shoutouts at the end of every video. Over on Cameo, I can do funny videos reading lines from zombies, memes like how do we tell him, birthday wishes for friends or family, or whatever else you desire, practically anything. Of course, none of this is necessary, just watching and enjoying the videos helps me immensely and I greatly appreciate it. However, I think it's about time I start setting up additional revenue streams because Zombies' popularity is tumultuous and always goes through ups and downs. As I'm sure you've lately seen on the channel, viewership is down a lot. We go through big highs when new games release, but then during these drought periods, I need more income stability so I don't have to worry as much about it and I can focus more on improving the quality of the content. My highest quality videos are not always the ones that best please YouTube algorithms, so instead, this way I can produce my best work knowing I don't have to think as much about how well the content's going to perform. So if you'd like to support me on Patreon for exclusive content or would like a simple Cameo message, you can do so to further support me via the links below, but only if you can afford it and you actually want to help me. Don't feel like you are forced to, don't worry, I'll survive. It would just help relieve some of the pressure during inconsistent periods on the channel so I don't have to solely rely on AdSense revenue and still maintain the sheer quantity and quality of content that I put out. Obviously I pump out literally a boatload of content and some of these are absolutely crazy projects over hour-long videos, so it's a lot on my plate, especially when these videos don't perform particularly well. And I've not been doing many sponsorships lately to help supplement revenue either, so it would greatly help. Thank you for any generous person once again who does kindly support the channel. It means the absolute world and will really help keep this boat afloat.